ADHD is affecting my money so much, and I really struggled with impulse spending. I really believe that it was a me problem, that I just wasn't motivated enough, and that everyone else around me seemed to have it figured out, but there was something wrong with me. My whole goal of talking about ADHD and money is to really help people reframe how they think about these tasks. Who you are is going to be reflected onto everything you do, your career, your friendships, your relationships, and that includes your relationship with money.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Sorry I Missed This, the show where we talk about all things ADHD, relationships, intimacy, and communication. It's me, your host, Cate Osborne, and today's episode is about our relationship to money. When I started Sorry I Missed This, my idea was that I wanted to explore ADHD and relationships. And for a really long time, I defined relationships intrapersonally, right? Our relationship with our boss, our spouse, our kids, our parents. But as the show has grown and as the topics have expanded, I've realized that there are so many more relationships in our lives. Money is a really tricky topic for me. I have a lot of shame and guilt around the ways that I have accumulated debt, about the ways that I have overspent, about the ways that I have compulsively spent. And when I started doing research, when I started trying to understand where those behaviors were coming from, what I found was really interesting. A lot of women with ADHD struggle with finances. We struggle with impulsive shopping, with compulsive shopping, even shopping addictions. And so I thought, why not do an episode about that? Why not break the stigma and talk about money with Ellyce Fulmore? I am a huge fan. You are going to figure that out very early in the podcast. Ellyce is the author of Finance for the People, a book that at its core is about our relationship to money and the stories that we tell ourselves about money. She has done a ton of work fighting for neurodivergent people to have access to better education and better ways of learning about money. She has developed entire courses that are geared towards people with ADHD and helping us navigate those tricky places around spending and impulse shopping and planning a budget, which I don't know about you is really hard for me. And so I'm really excited to open this conversation up because money is tough. Money is ubiquitous. Money is something that we have to have in order to exist in our society, but it's also something that we don't talk about a lot, and we don't talk about the ways that our ADHD can impact our relationship to money. And so I'm really excited about this episode. This is one that I've been wanting to do for a really long time. And so without further ado, here is Ellyce and I's conversation about money here on Sorry I Missed This. Hey, Ellyce, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
I want to jump right into things. And a lot of times on Sorry I Missed This, we talk about interpersonal relationships. We talk about bosses and coworkers and parents and kids and partners and all of that stuff. But you focus on a very different type of relationship. You focus on the relationship between an individual and money. And can you tell me how that got started? What made you interested in that? And what that relationship can look like? That's like a 7-part question, but just, go off.
So how I got started with all of this was I actually was doing a degree in kinesiology, and my focus was on adaptive physical activity. So working with folks with cognitive and physical disabilities. And when I graduated, I got a job at a rec center in the financial aid office. And throughout that job, I had the opportunity to speak to so many people and hear so many different experiences of folks who were essentially trying to access recreation because they didn't have the financial means to pay full price. And so they had come from just so many different backgrounds. A lot of them were immigrants. There was people who were recently incarcerated and people who were struggling with addiction. And these stories were they just changed my view on money completely, because I was the person who struggled with my finances throughout university because of my undiagnosed ADHD, and I really struggled with impulse spending. And I really believe that it was a me problem, that I just wasn't motivated enough. I just didn't know what to do, and that everyone else around me seemed to have it figured out, but there was something wrong with me. And when the pandemic hit, I was laid off from that job. And during that year, I also came out publicly as queer and was diagnosed with ADHD. So like then I had these big pieces, like these big awakening, I guess, of my own identity. I started to realize like, holy shit, my like ADHD is affecting my money so much. Being queer is affecting my money so much. And then so that's like why I focus so much on how your identity intersects with your finances and how all these unique aspects about who you are and how you were raised and how you move through the world actually impact everything that you do with your money.
So the obvious follow-up question, I think, then is how does ADHD, how does being queer, how do those things relate to money, relate to our finances?
Oh my gosh, in like every single way. So in the sense of any sort of like mental health challenges, that obviously impacts the way that your brain processes information, thinks about things, the way you process emotions, that type of thing. So with ADHD, we all know that executive functioning is a struggle. And so executive functioning is involved in so many aspects of your finances, like paying your bills on time, remembering to show up to an appointment and not get a late fee or a cancellation fee, organizing where your money goes, like setting up automations, like, you know, planning a long-term goal, like all of these things. And then there's also something that we experience a lot, which is called delayed discounting. And it has to do with essentially we want dopamine, which I'm sure everyone listening to this is like, we know this. But that makes it so that we really overvalue immediate rewards and we undervalue long-term rewards. So that makes it really hard to stay consistent with long-term goals, like paying off a lot of debt or saving up a lot of money or investing for retirement, because you're not seeing that progress really along the way. You're not getting a dopamine hit until you've completed it. So we're more likely to be like, well, I'm just going to spend that money that I was saving for a new vehicle on this like really cute sweater that I want instead, because that's going to feel good in this moment. And like, it could take me years to do that. And it's not necessarily that it's like a conscious decision that's happening. It's just that your brain is like, give me dopamine right now in the fastest way possible. And then impulse control kind of plays into that as well. Obviously shows up in things like impulse spending, but it also shows up in just like a lot of decisions we make that could then end up having financial repercussions down the line, because we're just making these decisions more quickly without necessarily weighing all the consequences. And then on a bigger note, you mentioned like the queerness and how that affects your money. I think with that and other pieces of your identity, it really impacts how you view the world, and that kind of impacts how you think money should be spent or not spent. It impacts how people treat you, which could impact your ability to get a job, your ability to rent an apartment, your ability to, you know, do different things if you are experiencing like oppression for any of those identities. I know for a lot of people, it doesn't feel like money is that personal and like emotional and connected to everything, but it just truly like who you are is going to be reflected onto everything you do, like your career, your friendships, your relationships, and that includes your relationship with money.
So I don't know if you've checked the news lately, Canadian friend, but you know, it's a little rough out there right now for some of us. And I think sometimes it is okay to want that healthy dopamine reward, right? Maybe you buy yourself something nice. Maybe you take yourself out for a nice meal, order takeout, take the stress off or whatever. How do we, as ADHDers, how do we navigate the I want it now, I'm looking for that dopamine, and moments where that might be healthy, that might contribute to making our day a little bit better, a little bit nicer, and then the sort of and now I'm entering a spending spiral because maybe if I keep consuming, the world won't be on fire.
Yeah, I 100% understand the spending to cope, because that was like my life for so long. It like still is. Like, I'm not going to pretend that I don't still impulse spend. You know, it still happens. So my advice is to build that into your financial plan. Like, plan for the fact that you are going to impulse spend. So how this works for me is I have a monthly allowance that I give myself that is like my money to spend on like fun stuff, anything I want, and I put no restrictions on that money. So that amount, you can determine what you can comfortably afford within your budget, but I transfer that onto a separate card that is my spending card. And I basically am putting out more physical barriers, so it's harder for me to like access other money. And then I give myself, no limits. So no guilt on this. I can buy whatever the heck I want. And then the other thing that I do is I actually have what's called a sinking fund, which is basically just where it's a savings account essentially, but you put a small amount into it every single month. And then like you kind of end up with a nest egg over time. And so I have a sinking fund specifically for impulse spending. So I'll put in like $5 to $10 a month, like something small that I, wouldn't notice too much. And then on times where, all this shit is going down in the world and I'm like, I really just need to buy whatever it is, or I need to start a new hobby immediately to distract myself. I have this impulse spending fund that if I end up going over budget, I can use that to kind of cover, what's going on. So I call it my oh shit fund.
I'm picturing like a big like red button in like a box and you open it, you're like, time to start a new hobby, like slam the button down. I like that immensely. One of the things that I loved about your book is that you talk a lot about the word should. Can you talk to us about the word should?
I feel like there's a lot of people obviously struggle with this, but I think especially when you're neurodivergent, you've spent your entire life trying to like fit yourself into this like neurotypical box. And that just brings on so many extra layers of shame and so many extra layers of shoulds, because you're constantly telling yourself like, you should be able to do this. Why can't you do that? Like everyone else can do this. You should be acting like this. Like that's a narrative I feel like that a lot of us have taken on, and it affects our life a lot, because even like when you get a diagnosis and you start to come, you're accepting it and you feel like you're making a lot of progress, it still comes up so often. I actually talked about it in the book that I've been able to kind of dismantle this for money. But then when I was writing the book, I found myself really beating myself up because I couldn't stick to what I thought a typical author writer schedule would be. And I didn't even make the connection until I was doing a book event and someone asked me a question about it. And I was like, oh my God, you are so right. Like I was doing like the thing I'm telling people, like helping people get through with money. I was doing that to myself with writing.
We hear these messages around money, like just track every penny, just start a savings account, that kind of thing. But those shoulds and justs really often backfire for ADHD brains. And so I'm wondering if you have strategies that you've found in your work working with ADHD clients, writing your book, that tend to work better than those hard and fasts. No, you have to do it this way. What works for ADHD brains?
My whole goal of talking about ADHD and money is to really help people who are neurodivergent like reframe how they think about these tasks. So one of the things I say is like, stop trying to force yourself to do something that you don't want to do, and instead try to make everything something that you want to do.
Yeah.
So basically what that looks like is trying to inject dopamine into these financial tasks so that you actually are maybe not like excited about it, but you feel it's easier to start because there's some sort of draw for you. Like I'm a big fan of gamification where there's a reward, or it's literally like a game board, or like I have a Taylor Swift themed savings tracker with like all the albums and, stuff like that. So like that works for my brain because it's like fun to create that. It's fun to color it in. If you like bullet journaling, that's also like a great way to do it. So basically just like thinking about the things that you like. And also if you have any other systems in your life that are remotely working for you, think about what is it about those systems that works. Maybe you will only remember what groceries you need to get if you write them on like your fridge. If that's the case, maybe you start writing down like the bills you need to pay on your fridge, trying to kind of work with your brain instead of actively fighting against it, and find ways that these tasks make sense for you. And basically just like forget about what anyone says about how you should save money, how you should pay off debt, how you should budget. Like there's so many different ways to get there. And I feel like that is what my degree has really taught me, like working with folks with disabilities, like the whole job was essentially adapting different tasks and skills and activities. And what always mattered at the end was the outcome. Could they play the sport they wanted to play? Could they like move up and down the stairs on their own? That was all that mattered. It didn't matter how they got there. And yeah, I feel like that's the same for ADHD and money.
One of the first times, casual hair flip, that I was mentioned in the New York Times was a article that they did about how women with ADHD have higher rates of compulsive spending issues and higher rates of debt. And they just happened to mention my work in this article. And I made the absolutely stupid mistake of reading the comments section. And that was when I learned that a lot of people have a lot of opinions about ADHD, a lot of opinions about what quote unquote responsible spending looks like, what, being an adult looks like, on and on and on. So every time I talk about money, I always think about that comment section. And I think about shame and guilt and embarrassment around struggling with money. Because I struggle with money. Like, I have read your book. I am doing the work. I try really hard, but I still do. I struggle with my finances a lot. And I do carry a lot of shame and a lot of guilt around that, because why can't I just? Why can't I just get it together and all of those things? And so I'm wondering if you can speak to a little bit of that shame and that guilt and how that shows up in our relationship with money.
First off, I want to say that I had the same experience as you with the New York Times and the comment section. And I actually made a video with like some of the hate comments.
Oh my God, they were so mean. And I was like, why do people just go on the internet and be mean? I don't get it. It's fine. It's
absolutely brutal. And I think it taught me really that people still don't understand what ADHD is or how it affects
they really
people.
don't.
But with the guilt and shame, I think, a lot of that stems from us as a society, like not talking about money, but then simultaneously placing so much importance and value on how we manage our finances. And if you are feeling that way, that is completely understandable. And it's frustrating a lot of times when you do open up, if it's not to someone who is like a safe space and kind of understands what you're going through, that you can be met with a lot of like the shoulds and the justs, like, you just need to do this and this helped you so much. And it's so easy to convince ourselves that like we're the only ones struggling. And I did the same thing. Like, when I was in the worst of my debt and impulse spending, I was convinced that all my friends were doing amazing. And like, they're inviting me out to dinner and I'm like, I can't afford this, but they obviously can. Like, they're managing everything. And it wasn't until years later, like probably 5+ years later, that we actually had a conversation. And it was like, oh, we were all struggling, but like nobody wanted to talk about it. But if we had just talked about it, then we could have like done free activities together instead of going out for dinner. And yeah, it's a frustrating thing, and something that I feel like we can all work to dismantle. And, if you are nervous about talking about your situation, like, start small. You don't have to like share everything. I know we're chronic oversharers, but, you don't have to spill all the beans right away if you don't want to. Like, even just talking about money in a way that's not connected to you personally, that can help. Like, asking your friends like, oh, what credit card do you like using? Or are you saving for anything right now? Small conversations like that maybe feel less scary to dive into than like, how much debt are you in? Starting with that at least gets you a little bit more comfortable with the topic of money. And then I feel like that opens things up and gives permission to the people you're talking to also maybe share a little bit about what they're going through. And then like little by little, you start to break down those walls and realize, you're not the only one struggling.
This is one that I get asked a lot about, the ADHD tax. Do you think the ADHD tax is real, Ellyce?
100%. Yeah, no question.
So for our dear listeners who might not know, the ADHD tax is sort of a colloquial term for when you have ADHD, you lose money on things just by the sheer nature of the way that ADHD can manifest in your life. So think about things like late fees or missed appointments, or even just the onions that you put in your refrigerator and then they go in the drawer and you forget that they exist, and then you have to go buy more onions. And so now you're spending more money on onions. I don't know why I'm talking so much about onions, but Can you talk a little bit about how that ADHD tax can also impact our relationship with money?
Yeah, so I 100% think it's real. And because of many
Oh,
of the
it's
things you just
definitely real.
many things you just listed, like it's so much harder for us to do a task that would be like seemingly simple to someone who is neurotypical. How that ends up affecting our relationship with money is that it actually kind of breaks our own trust, I think, in our ability to manage these things. And then especially if you're already struggling with this narrative of like I should be doing this, like if I could only do this, like it just like compounds that because now you're like, "Oh my God, I can't even like cook the food in my fridge before it goes bad. I can't even remember the onions for this meal, or even like this happens to me a lot is where I meal plan for something. I cook the meal and then I get the ick and I don't want
Oh
that meal
man,
and I can't
every
eat
day
it.
of my life.
And then that's frustrating because you're like, oh my gosh, I put so much time and energy into like planning this. And then now I don't even want to eat it and I'm going to order takeout. And that's like frustrating because I was doing the thing that I thought was, you know, smart for my finances. And now I'm ending up like in the same spot anyway. So it develops this like, why even try? Like, can I be trusted with my money? Can I be trusted to do these things? The first step to moving past that is accepting that the ADHD tax exists and also like accepting that you're disabled or like, but I know not everyone resonates with that definition, but like for me, like my neurodivergence is debilitating in a day-to-day sense. Like I struggle to take care of myself. And I think that I've had to like overcome some internalized ableism that I didn't even realize I had, especially like some coming from working in disability field. I still had that like, but you should be able to do this. Or like you
Yeah.
did this one time in your life. Like you were doing this when you were this like 20. So why can't you do
Yeah.
it now? Like, that for me was like what really helped me move through that was fully accepting that I'm disabled. I have experienced ADHD tax and not everyone does. So like the comparison just it isn't helpful to anyone. It's just like this is my situation and I'm just going to accept it for what it is and like work within what I have.
You mentioned something really interesting, which is the question of, I have done these things, how can I trust myself? When we're talking about money, not only is there the element of needing to be able to trust ourselves and have confidence in ourselves, but many women with ADHD are also partnered.
Yeah, it's so complicated. Even just like we've talked so much about our relationship to money, and then it's like, okay, now let's add another person and their relationship to money.
Whole other layer. Yeah, and their relationship to money. Like my husband came from a very different monetary background. And, it's fine. And we've worked through it and we've communicated, but we thought about money differently. We talked about money differently. His family has an entirely different understanding of money than mine did. And so it was really interesting going into a partnership where one of us had like heated spoilers, but like investments and like an IRA and like all of I was like, I don't even know what that is. I've never heard of that in my entire life. And, moving into that relationship of how do we even begin the conversation?
The first thing I always recommend is understanding your own money story first, starting to understand maybe why you struggle with certain things, even if that's just like understanding ADHD and how it affects your brain. And then same thing for your partner. Hopefully they also have that kind of baseline understanding. And, if you haven't started that work yet, that's something you could also start together. And then once you have that, it's really sharing those stories with each other in very open and honest conversations where really at the beginning, it's just listening and trying to understand where they came from, how they were raised, what they've experienced, what their trauma is, and not trying to make any sort of changes necessarily at this moment, right? It's just like, I want to understand. And also like observing how your partner acts in different situations. Like one example for me is my partner experiences a lot of scarcity specifically around grocery shopping, like always wanting to get the absolute best deal on like everything, like something that's even like a $2 thing because of like just experiencing some forms of scarcity growing up. And so, but that has ended up affecting us in some ways because we have the money to like not necessarily go to like 5 different grocery stores to get the best deal. And so sometimes we get in like little arguments about that because I'm like, grocery shopping's so hard for me. Like, I just want to do the one store and be done. And then, she's like, well, I want to get the best deal. And like, obviously both are valid, like, and so that was something that I brought up of like, hey, I noticed that you do this and that's not something that I do. Like, can we talk about like where that comes from and how important that is to you and like, things like that. And then once you're at that point where you feel like you are understanding each other, that's where you can begin to talk about coming to compromises. Now, your styles may mesh and they may work well together. In other situations, you might find that you and your partner have such different approaches and mindsets around money that you're struggling to feel heard or understood, or they're getting mad at you for doing something constantly. It's like a constant thing that's building up and building resentment. And so if that's the case, this is where you kind of want to figure out, okay, can we come to a compromise with our 2 stories? Can we figure out a way that this works for both of us? And I know this is not what a lot of people want to hear, but in some cases, you are just not compatible when it comes to your money. And people often don't take this very seriously, I guess, like in terms of like a relationship deal breaker. If you're walking away from a relationship for a reason that isn't like infidelity or like something big, if you're just deciding like, oh, they want kids and I don't, so this isn't the relationship for me, we often don't think about money in that conversation, but money is one of the biggest reasons for divorce. And it affects so much because your money is going to affect all those other decisions too, like where you want to live. Do you like whether or not you want kids? Do you want to buy a house? Do you not? Like, do you want to travel the world? And then those money traumas they can cause so much stress and turmoil in your relationship if you're constantly like butting heads with that. So I think that is something to consider. Like, can we work through this and compromise, or is this just not someone who I'm compatible with and that I ultimately need to walk away from?
So if there is a dear listener out here who is really resonating with this conversation, really struggling with money and is looking for resources, looking for like, what is the next tangible step that I can take in order to start doing some repair and getting my relationship to money under control, what do you got?
Okay, well, shameless self-promotion. I'm going to suggest
please, this is
my
the
book.
moment. This is the moment. Chill away, Ellyce.
All right. So yeah, my book is called Keeping Finance Personal. And I think that's a great place to start if you have never really thought about your money story. And even if you don't want to purchase the book, like that would be my recommendation of where to start. So, thinking about childhood memories that stick out that have to do with money. So like things that you were told about money, whether that was like constantly hearing like, we can't afford that, or money doesn't grow on trees, or something like that. Also like what you observed your caregivers doing and saying around money. So like when you weren't part of the conversation, did you witness your caregivers fighting about money? Did you hear them on the phone stressed about paying bills? Like, what kind of things did you hear and observe? What kind of things did they say to you? And what kind of things were you taught explicitly about money? And that may be taught or not taught, because I grew up in a household that didn't talk about money. So basically the only thing I learned was how to roll coins into those little rolls to take to the bank. So yeah, I think that's like a great place to start, and really just focus on understanding how your brain works, and then finding the tools and strategies and systems that work with your brain instead of against it. Let go of those neurotypical standards and embrace the weirdness.
It's not silly if it makes your life easier.
Exactly.
TM. Ellyce, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. End of the episode.